They said humanity was born to crawl under the shadows of giants, but legends whispered that once, humans hunted monsters that touched the sky. When the giants came down from the misted peaks, the world changed. They were ancient as stone and taller than towers, their eyes glowing like molten amber. They called themselves the unerring children of the first earth. They didn't speak with words, but with thunder that shook the mountains, and their footsteps made rivers tremble. To them, humans were insects, fragile, fleeting, and foolish. And perhaps they were right. Generations passed under the weight of that truth. The giants ruled the valleys, the oceans, and even the clouds. Humans were herded into the plains, forbidden to rise, forbidden to dream. Some served as workers in the giant forges, hammering iron plates bigger than their homes. Others built altars of obedience from the bones of their own dead. But not all humans bowed. Far to the north, where the ice met the sea, lived a small tribe of wanderers called the Tarl. They had no walls, no kings, only stories. Stories of a time before the giants. Stories of men and women who had brought down beasts 10 times their size. The youngest of the Tarl, a hunter named Kael, never believed those tales. He had seen the bones himself, enormous tusks jutting from the frozen earth like white trees, but bones didn't prove courage, they only proved death. Yet everything changed the night the Unerim came for their hunting grounds. Kael was out on the ridge scanning for seals, when the air turned strange. The snow vibrated. His breath caught as a shadow swallowed the horizon. A giant, wrapped in furs the size of ships, was walking toward the fjord. In its hand a net woven from silver chains. Behind it trailed a procession of smaller creatures, slaves, humans, dragging sleds of ice. Kael's tribe had no weapons that could pierce giant hide. They could only run, but as Kael watched the creatures' slow, heavy movements, something stirred inside him, not fear, but memory. The shape of the tusks buried in the ice, the chipped spearhead his grandfather wore around his neck, the carvings of men standing beside towering beasts. That night, when he returned to camp, the elders were arguing. Some wanted to flee inland, others to offer tribute, but Kael stood before the fire and said, "If we run, we die. If we bow, we vanish. But once, we killed the mammoths. And if we could kill gods of fur and bone, we can kill these." The camp fell silent. The old woman who kept the stories, Mira, the seer, looked up from the fire. Her eyes, blind but bright, glimmered with something Kael had never seen before. "Then you remember," she whispered. "The hunt." Kael frowned. "The hunt. The first hunt," she said. "The one that woke the fire in human blood. If you wish to fight the giants, Kael of the Tarl, you must find the bones of the mammoth kings. They remember what we've forgotten." And so it began, not with a sword, not with an army, but with a story. The story of how humanity once stood tall enough to face the impossible. Snow fell in silence as Kael stood over the burial field. All around him, half buried beneath centuries of frost, were the bones, colossal ribs like the arches of temples, skulls the size of houses. The wind howled through them, making a low, mournful hum, like the voice of something ancient that refused to die. He had followed Myra's words north for 3 days and nights, across frozen rivers and glaciers sharp as glass. The rest of the tribe thought him mad. Even his sister Lyra had begged him to stop, but Kael couldn't stop. Not after what he had seen, the arrogance of the giants, the hopelessness in his people's eyes. He believed the answer lay here, beneath the ice, where the first hunters had once stood. Kael knelt beside a shattered tusk, brushing away frost with his glove. It wasn't stone, it wasn't wood. It was something alive, or had been. He felt warmth pulse faintly through the frozen marrow. Then, a sound, a deep crack. The ice beneath him shifted. Kael leaped back as a fissure spread across the ground, splitting the tundra open like a wound. From the depths below came a low rumble, not quite an earthquake, more like breathing. He stared into the dark gap, and saw light. A faint golden glow pulsed from beneath the ice. Kael dropped to his knees and peered closer. There, frozen inside a column of crystal-clear ice, was something impossible. A spear, a human weapon, enormous, its tip forged from black metal that shimmered with trapped lightning. He whispered, "The Mammoth Spear." The moment he touched it, the world changed. The wind stopped. The snow hung motionless in the air. And suddenly, he wasn't standing in the cold anymore. He was somewhere else. Beneath him stretched a vast plain of golden grass. In the distance, mammoths roared, their tusks gleaming in the sunset. Humans ran among them, tiny but fierce, wielding spears and fire. He heard chanting an ancient tongue, calling upon the first hunt. Then a voice, calm, deep like thunder through water. "We did not win by strength. We won by memory." Kael gasped. stumbling back as the vision shattered. He was once again in the frozen world, but the spear remained glowing beneath the ice. His hand burned with the mark of a mammoth's tusk. When he returned to the camp, his eyes were different, and so was his voice. He told the Tarl what he had seen. Some called it madness, others called it destiny. Mira, the seer, smiled faintly. Then the bones remember you, she said. The giants will feel this stirring. They will come. And she was right. Far away, in the high cities of the Honor Rim, a ripple of light passed through their storm towers. A giant priest turned his gaze northward and whispered, "The small ones dream again." Kael clenched his fist. Let them come, because for the first time in 1,000 years, humans were remembering how to fight. At dawn, the tribe gathered around Kael as he stood before the frozen lake. The glow beneath the ice was brighter now, a pulsing amber heartbeat. The Mammoth Spear was calling. No one spoke. The wind itself seemed to hold its breath. Kael lifted his axe and drove it into the ice. Once, twice, again the echoes rolled through the valley like drumbeats of war. With every strike, the ice cracked wider, until suddenly, the lake erupted in a burst of steam and light. The spear shot upward. It hovered before him, dripping molten frost, its blade humming like thunder. The handle was made of ancient ivory carved with the faces of long-dead hunters. The air shimmered around it, bending reality itself. Kael reached out, and when his fingers brushed the hilt, the world roared. Visions poured through him, the memories of those who first wielded it. He saw hunters running across tundras, barefoot and fearless, chasing beasts that blotted out the sun. He felt the heat of their fires, the rhythm of their chants, the pulse of life that refused to kneel before giants or gods. He saw the first kill, the moment a human, fragile and small, brought down a mountain of fur and rage. The fire that burned in their blood ignited in his. When the vision faded, Kael stood trembling, his eyes glowing faint gold. The mammoth spear pulsed once more, and then fell still, heavy, solid, and alive. Myra, the seer, stepped forward. The weapon remembers you, but remember this. The spear is not a tool of conquest. It awakens what sleeps in you. If your heart falters, it will consume you. Kael nodded. Then let it burn. That night, as the tribe celebrated, Mira warned him of what was coming. The giants had seen the light. They would not ignore it. Already, scouts were moving through the forests, sniffing for rebellion. Kael looked at the spear beside the fire. Its blade reflected the stars, but within that reflection he saw movement shapes forming in the darkness. Mammoths, ghosts of the old world. Watching him, he whispered, "What do you want from me?" The largest of the ghostly mammoths lowered its head. Kael heard the same voice from before, deep and resonant. To remember, to finish the hunt. The next morning, Kael led a small band into the ice fields. His sister Lyra, the tracker Joren, and 2 hunters from the southern clans who had come after hearing the stories. They were few, but determined. As they marched north, toward the land where the first mammoths had fallen, the horizon trembled. A shadow moved among the mountains, colossal, deliberate. The giants had awoken. Kael gripped the spear tighter. The mark on his hand glowed brighter with every step. "Let them find us," he muttered. "This time we are not prey." And somewhere far above, in the clouds, the unerring war drums began to thunder. The first giant appeared at sunrise. Kael and his band were crossing the Frostbine Valley, a graveyard of frozen rivers and jagged cliffs, when the ground began to shake. At first it was distant, like thunder rolling beneath the earth. Then came the wind, heavy and sharp, carrying the scent of molten metal. The sky dimmed. Through the mist, a figure emerged, vast, armored in black stone. Its skin shimmered with cracks of burning gold, and in its hand was a hammer the size of a boulder. Each step shattered the ice beneath its feet. Kael had heard tales of the Unarum, but stories could never capture the weight of their presence. The giant looked like the mountain had learned to walk. Joren froze beside him. "We can't fight that." Kael didn't answer. His hand burned with the mammoth mark, the spear pulsing at his side. He remembered Mira's words. The spear awakens what sleeps in you, and what slept within him was no longer fear. The giant's voice rolled like thunder. "Little embers, you stir again." Its eyes glowed brighter, focusing on Kael. "I smell the old fire on you, the one we buried long ago." Kael stepped forward. "You buried nothing, you only forgot." Then he drove the mammoth spear into the ground. The impact split the frost. Light erupted from the fissures, golden and alive, racing beneath the snow like wildfire. The ghostly shapes of mammoths surged around him, translucent and roaring. The earth trembled beneath their stampede. The giant roared back, swinging its hammer down. Kael rolled aside just as the ground exploded in a storm of ice and stone. Lyra fired an arrow that shattered against the giant's armor. Joran threw a spear that might as well have been a twig. Nothing pierced its hide, but Kael saw something, a weak point where the golden cracks met its ribs, pulsing like a heart. He sprinted forward, leaping across broken ice, and hurled the Mammoth Spear. The weapon screamed through the air like thunder. It struck true. The explosion of light blinded them all. When Kael's vision cleared, the giant was on one knee, roaring in pain. The golden light leaking from its wound was dimming. Kael retrieved the spear, panting. "Now you bleed like us," the giant laughed, a sound that shook the sky. "You have found a spark, little hunter, but sparks burn out." It raised its hammer for one final strike, and then stopped. The light in its eyes flickered, dimmed, and died. The giant collapsed backward, the ground trembling with its fall. Silence, only wind and breath. Lyra stared at Kael. Awe and fear mingled in her face. "You killed it." Kael looked down at the spear, now cold in his hands. "No," he said quietly. "We did, all of us, the living and the dead." As they stood amid the frozen wreckage, far above them in the clouds, the other giants turned their gaze north, and for the first time in an age, they felt something strange, something they had forgotten how to feel: fear. Word spread like wildfire through the tundra. The humans of the north, the miners of the storm cliffs, the nomads of the broken plains, all heard the same impossible tale. A giant had fallen. Some said it was the end of the world. Others said it was the beginning of a new one. For the first time in 1,000 years, the tribes began to gather. They came with old spears, rusted blades, and hearts that remembered what courage felt like. Children who had only known fear whispered Kael's name as if it were a prayer. But Kael wasn't thinking of glory. He was thinking of what came next. The giant's corpse had not turned to stone, as legends claimed. Instead, its blood, thick and luminous, seeped into the ice, melting it in strange patterns. Myra, the seer, warned them not to touch it. "The blood of the unarmed carries memory," she said. "It will remember you if you drink it, and not kindly." Yet something in that golden glow called to Kael. He felt it hum in his veins, like a song half forgotten. The Mammoth Spear pulsed with the same rhythm. It was as if both relic and blood shared a heartbeat. That night, Kael dreamt again. He stood in the ancient plains, surrounded by hunters who bore the marks of mammoths on their skin. They circled a blazing pyre made from bones, chanting words that burned through his mind. A figure stepped from the fire, tall, human, yet impossibly radiant. The first hunter, her eyes blazed like twin suns. "Do you know why we killed the mammoths?" she asked. Kael hesitated. "To survive," she shook her head. "To remember we could." She raised a hand, and a spark of fire leapt into Kael's chest. "The giants stole our fire, but not our blood. Burn again." He woke gasping, his hands glowing faintly with golden lines that spread like veins of light. His heart hammered in rhythm with the spear. Outside the tent, the horizon blazed orange, not from dawn but from fire. Giant warships had descended from the clouds, their hulls carved from black obsidian, their banners glowing like suns. The retaliation had come. Kael emerged from his tent, face hardened, eyes reflecting the fire. "They think we are still prey," he said. "Then let them hunt us." The Tarl and the gathered tribes formed a circle around him. Some trembled, others lifted weapons. Lyra stood beside him, her bow drawn, her face fierce. "Tell us what to do, brother." Kael lifted the Mammoth Spear. "We fight not as one tribe," he said, voice carrying through the icy wind, "but as one blood, the blood that hunted gods." He drove the spear into the frozen ground, and the ice erupted in golden fire. The ghostly shapes of mammoths thundered once more across the plains, shaking the air with their silent cries. The humans roared back, feeling the same fire awaken in their chests. The giants were coming, but this time humanity was ready. The sky burned. From the clouds descended the armies of the Unarum, hundreds of giants clad in obsidian and light, their weapons forged from storms, their voices echoing like rolling thunder. The earth itself groaned beneath their arrival. Against them, on the frozen plains, stood a few thousand humans, ragged, weary, but unbroken. No walls, no fortresses, only will. And at their head stood Kael, the Mammoth Spear blazing in his grip like a shard of the sun. Lyra stood beside him, bowstrung, her breath fogging in the cold. "If we die," she said softly, "let them remember why." Kael smiled faintly. "They will." Then he raised the spear. The mammoth spirits answered. From the ice rose the ghosts of the old world, colossal luminous creatures of bone and fire. Their trumpets shook the mountains. Giants faltered for the first time in ages, not from wounds, but from memory. They remembered the old war, The first giant charged, hammer raised high. Kael sprinted forward, his feet cracking through ice. The spear glowed hotter, its light burning through the fog. He met the blow mid-swing. The impact split the sky in two. The shockwave hurled humans to the ground, but Kael did not fall. He screamed, thrust the spear upward, and drove it into the giant's throat. The light poured through the wound like fire through glass. The giant stumbled, then shattered into golden dust. The humans roared. They surged forward, hundreds of them, with spears, blades, even stones, emboldened by the impossible. Each death fed the flame. Each shout carried the echo of the first hunters. All around the plains erupted into chaos, men climbing onto giant bodies, mammoth spirits trampling across the battlefield, golden fire meeting black thunder. The war between memory and arrogance had begun anew. Mira, far behind the lines, stood on a rise of ice, her blind eyes glowing. She raised her hands and chanted words that rippled through the storm. Remember the first fire, children of the hunt. Remember who you are. Kael felt the words burn through his blood. He saw the first hunter again, standing in the fire, smiling. You carry what we began, she said. End it. The largest of the Anarum descended, the high one, ancient and terrible, taller than mountains, crowned in lightning. Small one, it thundered. You cannot kill what made you. Kael looked up, fire dripping from his armor, the mammoth spear pulsing like a living heart. Then I'll remind you what we made. He hurled the spear with all his strength. It soared through the storm, trailing golden light, the memory of every hunt, every scream, every act of defiance that had ever made humanity human. When it struck the High One's chest, the world exploded. Light swallowed everything. When the fire cleared, the giants were gone. The sky was still. The plains quiet. Only ash and wind remained. Kael knelt amid the silence, the broken half of the mammoth spear in his hands. Lyra found him there, breathing, alive. It's over, she whispered. Kael looked toward the horizon, where mammoth spirits faded back into the dawn. No, he said softly. It's beginning. He lifted the broken spear to the sunrise. Around him, humans knelt, not in fear but in reverence, because from that day forward they would no longer be known as the small ones. They would be called what they truly were, hunters.